Hello, welcome to today's event. I'm Lizzie, Chief Operating Officer of Bristol Green Capital Partnership, and we're really delighted you could join us for the launch of Bristol Green Capital Partnership's Climate Action Programme. Just a few quick Zoom housekeeping notes before we get started. This is our first time using Zoom webinar, and we're 90% confident. We've done a few practice runs, but please bear with us if we do experience any technical difficulties. All the attendees and participants won't be able to see each other today, but the chat is open, so you can either use that to post reflections to panelists and all attendees, or you can connect with each other directly. And we're encouraging everyone to use the question and answer function throughout the event to ask questions. Please let us know your name and your organisation and who the question is for. And when we get to the panel, we'll be looking forward to asking those. You can also vote for questions that you want to hear asked. And following today's event, we'll be doing an optional networking session, which we really hope you can join us for some more vocal contact and networking. Throughout today's event, we're encouraging you to use the hashtag #ClimateActionBristol, hashtag #ClimateActionBristol on Twitter, if you want to sort of share anything that you've heard or tell people about what you're doing towards the climate emergency. So let's get started. So this launch represents a really exciting moment in Bristol Green Capital Partnership's journey. For those of you that are new to the partnership, we're a network of over 1,000 member organisations in the Bristol region that have been working together for a decade to address the climate and ecological challenges that Bristol faces and come up with collaborative solutions together. I'm quite often asked what makes Bristol unique in the level of activity and engagement that happens here. And although it is quite hard to pinpoint, one ingredient must be the willingness that we have in this city to connect, exchange, share insights, and collaborate even among the most unlikely partners. This mix creates a bit of a melting pot, and through that we've developed quite a shared understanding of the scale and nature of the challenge, and the solutions become clearer to us day by day. And I think that allows us to hold some multiple priorities together at once. There is a really good understanding in the city that social justice needs to be at the heart of our climate and ecological action. And at times in the past, these have felt like competing priorities. But more recently, the work of partnership members and the One City Environment Board has helped us to find what we think are more holistic solutions. So since Bristol Green Capital Partnership's carbon neutral gathering at the beginning of 2019, where partnership members came together to crowdsource solutions to reduce carbon emissions, to last January's Decade of Transformation gathering, where over 100 members input into the One City Climate Strategy, which the Environment Board launched last March, we now have the clearest picture of our pathway as a city to achieve become carbon neutral and climate resilient. And now is the time for us to collaborate, deliver, and transform the city. Bristol has a goal to become carbon neutral and climate resilient by 2030, which is 20 years ahead of the national target. And this strong ambition reflects the concern of Bristol citizens. So in the annual Quality of Life survey, 86% of respondents say that they're concerned about climate change, and a recent Kin & Co study shows that 1 in 3 workers want their workplaces to take action. These citizens make up our local businesses and organisations, and they're also their customers. And increasingly, we're seeing climate action become a priority, and lots of organisations have already committed to really strong action. So now we're going to run a quick poll, and we want you to indicate whether you feel that climate action is a top priority for your business and organisation at the moment. We know that businesses and organisation has a huge role to play, and in Bristol there are over 18,000 businesses and organisations collectively responsible for 5,000 tonnes of carbon emissions, which is nearly 1% of the UK's business emissions. So looking at the results, we see 88% feel like it's a top priority, 10% no and 2% not sure. So yeah, so it's matching kind of what we think is the case. We know that this challenge is really complex, and there are many reasons why it might not yet be a top priority, not least the recent COVID pandemic and how that's affected businesses. And the fact that our economy is built on carbon intensive and ecologically damaging systems. Many of us will have gas boilers heating our buildings, petrol and diesel vehicles moving people and freight around the city, and our supply chains often outsource carbon emissions and the ecological footprint internationally. So it is essential that we collaborate wherever possible and work together to support progress. And this is why we're launching the Climate Action Programme with support from Natwest and Bristol City Council. We want to match the intention that we have in the city with action and work together with local businesses and organisations to identify and overcome barriers and work together to support city transformation that's as fast and fair as possible. And we're kick-starting the launch, joined by a really stellar lineup this morning. So really privileged to be joined by Alison, CEO of Natwest, who has very kindly made time in a very busy schedule to talk to us about how the bank is tackling the climate crisis and supporting work in Bristol. Dr. Alix Dietzel, lecturer in global ethics at the University of Bristol and member of the Bristol Advisory Committee on Climate Change, specialises in climate change, climate justice and human rights, is going to give us an overview of the global and national context and why this year represents a turning point. Jessica Ferrow, Bristol Green Capital Partnerships elected director, member of the One City Environment Board and co-founder of Sustainability Consultancy 12, is going to talk to us about the local context and the One City climate strategy. And then we're going to have a Q&A with our panel. We're going to share a few more details of the Climate Action Programme. And then George Sandilands of Spherics is going to talk to us about his startup offering a free trial of a digital carbon footprinting tool. We've got a really amazing video showing some of the work underway of partnership members, and then we're going to move to networking. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alison, who's with us until 10:30 this morning. It's really heartening to see the nation's largest institutions mobilising to support and spur the green revolution. NatWest is the leading lender to renewable sector and have committed £20 billion of funding to the climate action and sustainable finance a year. So I will hand over to Alison now.
Thank you, Lizzie, and it's great to be here today. Really delighted to be able to join you. I only wish it was in person, as I know many of us would wish it to be, particularly in Bristol, which I know will be wonderful in spring, and it also is a centre for business and community energy, which I always note when I come and visit, and not least the leaders that you have on the climate agenda, which is incredibly inspiring. It's really why at NatWest Group we're so proud to be partnering the Bristol Green Climate Partnership and Bristol Council to support the launch of the Climate Action Programme. This important initiative aligns brilliantly with our own ambitions as a bank to facilitate faster, simpler transition for business customers, wherever they're based, whatever their size, and at different stages of their journey to net zero. After all, I think as Lizzie has outlined, and many of you I know will have discussed constantly, this agenda is not a nice to have. This is now business critical. In the run up to COP26 in Glasgow, and as we emerge from a year-long health and economic crisis, all eyes are focused on how we will rebuild in a fairer, greener and more sustainable way. Tough, necessary targets have already been set, and in all reality, many will be brought forward in the years to come. Time is of the essence, and it is critical that we all work together to address this vital issue. We know this in our own financing activity, and we have spent considerable time measuring and analysing our portfolio and climate risk. We must now combat Scope 2 and 3 emissions, supporting our customers and clients to transition effectively and build resilience in our own businesses. I started NatWest as a graduate, and I can attest to the fact that climate was on the agenda for discussion for many years. but we've increasingly brought it to the top of our agenda for action. I'm proud of NatWest's long-standing reputation as the UK's leading bank on green issues. Back in 1991, we were the first of the UK banks to include environmental risk in commercial lending decisions. But as time has passed, extreme weather events have increased. There are impacts on our supply chain and natural resources, and businesses are exposed to climate risk, from direct consequence of climate change, changing consumer behaviour and demands, and new regulations to meet our national and international commitments. Mark Carney, I think, articulated it very well. The world is at a tipping point in the fight against climate change. The political will and financial appetite is there, but institutions need to create the right systems to harness it. Throughout my whole career and in all my dealings with customers and those we serve, my personal realization and determination to do something about this has grown stronger. And also that we can't wait around to wait for somebody else to fix this problem. We need to be part of the solution. Therefore, I'm putting NatWest Group on a very clear path and a clear set of commitments. We have the ability and therefore the responsibility to play a bigger role than most in the climate and agenda. As a leading bank for business customers and one of the largest for retail, we have the scale, scope, and critical connections into green priorities such as housing and transport. I hear this from politicians and I hear it from customers and I hear it from my own children. To put it bluntly, they know that they are inheritors of a climate challenge that was not of their making. And I want to be able to look them in the eye and tell them I stepped up, and so did everybody at NatWest, to make the right investments in our collective future. Just over a year ago, I set out the bank's purpose: to champion the potential of people, businesses, and families. And we can only do that by protecting our climate and securing the long-term strength and viability of our communities, which is why climate is one of our 3 core areas of purpose focus, alongside enterprise and learning. And we're on our way already. Last year, NatWest Group achieved net zero in our own operations. And as I mentioned, we've done extensive work to analyse and mitigate our portfolio of climate risk. But we must go further, and we have committed to be climate positive in our own operations by 2025, and importantly, to halve the climate impact of our financing activity by 2030. But this means not just removing financing, it means giving customers the knowledge and tools to track their emissions, providing incentives to make homes energy efficient, and greening our towns and cities by investing in renewables. For example, our role in financing Dogger Bank, which when complete will be the world's biggest wind farm. And meanwhile, our industry-first partnership with Octopus Energy is funding consumer transition to electric vehicles. And we've recently joined forces with Microsoft to support medium-sized businesses from every sector. Their cloud, data, and AI platform, combined with our customer relationships and insights, can help more customers understand and better understand and reduce their emissions. We've also committed to achieve a full phase out from coal by 2030, and will stop lending and underwriting to any oil and gas producers without a credible transition plan by the end of this year, which meets the terms of the 2015 Paris Accord. What's important is we're not washing our hands of the problem, we're proactively working to support the transition and the critical greening of UK industries. We're proud to be one of the principal sponsors of COP26 and this once-in-a-generation forum for net zero action. And we're also incredibly proud to partner BCGP and Bristol Council on your climate action programme, because these are the practical, real economy interventions which will help Bristol become carbon neutral and climate resilient by 2030, and help us to get closer to our global climate goals. As a bank, we support 88,000 business and commercial customers across the Southwest. We want every single one of them to have access to the climate resources and learning opportunities that are so critical to help them. This is how we drive change. This is how we mitigate climate risk at both a local business and a broader community level. And to all those businesses, big and small, I know the scale of the climate challenge can feel daunting. And yes, for us all, there is a bit of a mountain to climb here. But that journey begins with one step in the right direction. And each step has value, and each action to boost your green credentials will help secure your long-term success. Most importantly, this will require collaboration and partnership with all of us, and we are your partners in this. And the Climate Action Programme is a terrific way to pool resources and support. Thank you, Lizzie, for inviting me to join you today. We're delighted to partner and really delighted to join forces to drive on our green ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. Bristol Green Capital Partnership is privileged to receive the support of Natwest, and we know it sits alongside so much other activity. And it's great to see so many people from different organisations represented at the event here today. Please do keep chatting. It's great to see where you're joining us from. Next, I'd like to introduce Alix Dietzel, lecturer in global ethics from the University of Bristol, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the global context, the national context, and why 2021 represents a key turning point.
Thank you, Lizzie. That's great. Hi, everyone. I'm Alix Dietzel, lecturer in global ethics at the University of Bristol. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about climate justice, which is my area of research, and how that sets the context for action at the national and international level. So very quickly then, what is climate justice? Well, in my research, I treat climate change by its very nature as a problem of justice, specifically one of global justice. There's lots of reason for this, but two main ones are that it will primarily affect those who have done least to contribute to the problem. So we've already heard about children being affected, but it's also people from the global south will feel the effects most starkly due to unlucky geography and low adaptation capacity, and also those living in the global north who may not be as well off as others and may not have the capacity to adapt to the changing climate. And of course, future generations as well, those who are not yet born. And on the other hand, responding to climate change requires global and local decision-making on things like emissions reductions, technology development, adaptation finance, and just coordination. How do we work together? And I think these decisions really require discussions of fairness and justice. Even if you don't name it as such, you're discussing what people deserve, how much action we should take today to protect those who are most vulnerable, etc. So these are all questions of justice. And that's why I treat climate change as an issue of justice in my work. And it sets the kind of tone for everything that I do when I study global climate change action, local climate change action, and even actors in Bristol, which I'm doing at the moment, and I'll tell you more about in a minute. So what is the global context? Well, scientists recommend that we have to keep warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Note that 2 degrees was recommended until October 2018, so this is a new ambitious target set with the Paris Agreement. The bad news is that we actually hit a 1.1 degree change in 2020, despite COVID, and the 2018 IPCC report estimates that we will reach 1.5 between 2030 and 2052 if we continue on as we are today. So this is where you might have heard, we have 12 years to save the planet. That's where this number comes from. To give you a sense of how much work this will take, if you keep temperatures to 2 degrees in order to do that, you would need to cut global emissions by 40 to 70% relative to 2010 levels by 2050 and be at or near zero by 2100. To do it, to keep temperatures to 1.5 degrees, which is the new target, emissions would need to be cut by 45% relative to 2010 levels by 2030 and be at net zero by 2050. This is a huge ask because, as I'm about to show you, we're nowhere near that target. But before I show you where we are, let's just quickly think, why does 1.5 degrees matter? Why was this goal set? I've got just a few examples for you, but there's lots of interesting ones in the actual IPCC report if you want to follow up on this. So one example is sea level rise, around 10 centimeters less in a 1.5 degree world compared to 2 degrees. That sounds like not very much, but it means roughly 10 million people fewer exposed to risk. Severe heat waves, 14% of the world would be exposed to at least one extreme heat wave every 5 years in a 1.5 degree world, compared to 37% in a 2 degree world. It's a huge difference about exposure to risk, and we're talking about millions of people across the world here. Water scarcity, 271 million would be exposed to water scarcity in a 1.5 degree world, compared to 388 million in a 2 degree world. And then finally, because I know we're talking about businesses here, if we're thinking about GDP per capita, it will be down 8%, it's estimated, in a 1.5 degree world, compared to 13% in a 2 degree world. So what you can see here is that it's worth trying to get to the 1.5 degree target, but also that 1.5 degrees isn't perfect. We're already seeing climate change effects at 1.1, and the more we do and the more quickly we do it, the more people we can save from being at risk, and the better our planet will look for future generations and children. So where are we now? You might have heard of the Paris Agreement, famously discussed as a big achievement, and it did set some new stringent global targets. But what's interesting about the Paris Agreement is that it tells countries to set their own nationally determined contributions in order to meet this global target. And at the minute, those nationally determined contributions, if you put all the plans together, every country in the world, we're heading towards 3 degrees plus world at the minute. So they're really inadequate despite this global target of 1.5 degrees. Some good news is that participation has been significantly increased from the previous Kyoto Protocol, where only about 40 countries were trying to lower emissions, but it's not yet guaranteed that every single country in the world will act. And like I just said, the nationally determined contributions are inadequate. And there are also continued weak compliance measures. If you don't meet your targets that you set in your nationally determined contributions, there's no punishment for it. Every 5 years, countries are looked at in a review system where at the global stage, it is talked about how successful they have been and how they could do better. But this isn't really a compliance measure. It's more of a name and shame, and it doesn't actually hold countries to account. So that's the global context. And the IPCC recommends systemic change at every level of society. And the Paris Agreement is inadequate for this at the minute. It's not radical enough, and these promises made by countries are certainly not radical enough. So this is the context that we sit in at the moment, in the city of Bristol, as businesses, and in the UK. So at the global level, what does it look like? This is the Climate Action Tracker, and you can see here in the middle, the blue bar. With current policies and current promises, we're heading towards, at best, a 2.1 degree world, at worst 3.9. And even if we're being very optimistic about hitting all our targets, we're still going towards a 2.1 degree world on average, maybe even close to 3 degrees. Where does the UK sit here? Well, at the minute, it's still being measured as part of the EU because this hasn't been updated since Brexit, since that was so recent. But as you can see here, we're classed as insufficient, which means we're marginally keeping things under 3 degrees with our emissions levels. You can see there's no role models. There's only a couple of countries actually compatible with the Paris Agreement, Morocco and the Gambia, and lots of highly insufficient and critically insufficient countries heading us towards a 4 degree world. So what does this tell us about the global response to climate change? Well, I think the UN has played a really important role in building consensus and catalyzing action among states, but so far it's obviously failed to make a major impact. So as a climate justice scholar, I ask myself, well, are there any alternatives? Is there any hope anywhere if the states are kind of dragging their feet a bit? And the answer to me is yes. There's been a huge explosion of non-state responses to climate change in the past decade, including businesses, but also including NGOs, groups of individuals coming together, and then mixed non-state actors where businesses come together with local governments, for example, or mayors of cities to make promises and actions on climate change. And the Paris Agreement actually presents a significant shift away from a purely state-led approach to climate change, because for the first time, non-state actors are actually classed as important in the Paris Agreement, which is unprecedented for a global climate change treaty. In my work, I've compared state and non-state action, and I'm not here to say that non-state actors are magical and they can solve everything. They actually face the same key problems as states. There's a huge struggle to lower emissions at the rate required. There's an entrenched favoring of mitigation, which means lowering emissions over adaptation, so protecting people from current effects and future effects. There's a huge exclusion of the Global South from decision-making procedures at the global level, and there's a failure to change behavior of responsible actors. But I have found in my research that non-state climate change actors are moving towards enabling a condition of climate justice more creatively, ambitiously, and quickly. So often these actors, especially businesses, can make quick decisions, come together efficiently, and really instigate radical change, which we don't see necessarily at the state level. And cities are really important for this too. The city of Bristol in particular is very ambitious and has set out an unprecedented one city plan, which sets out targets that are 20 years ahead of the national targets, which is an incredible place to be in as a business and also as a climate change scholar. So the importance of non-state action, of course, is important for climate justice in the global context, but it's also important for businesses. So some examples could be decarbonizing your operations, building support for bold government policy, influencing employers and customers and partners, fostering innovation, being radical if you can. And this is good for businesses. It could reduce costs at the very minimum. It can attract employees who are socially conscious. And as we know, the current kind of millennials and Gen Zers are very interested in climate change and want to make a change and definitely want to, include that in where they work. And of course, you'll be ahead of the game. Things are changing, the context is shifting, and we are going to act on climate change. So you might as well get on board and really influence policy and influence the way things go. So just as a final message, I really think 2021 is a key year for climate change action. The COP is happening in the UK, which is a great opportunity for businesses and cities to get involved in climate change action. We're in a recovery from a pandemic that has showed us that changes in behavior at a huge scale are possible, and people are willing to change their behavior if it means helping others, which is great to see as a climate justice scholar. And of course, there's eyes on Bristol. They're currently refreshing their one city plan in light of the pandemic, but Bristol is a very ambitious city and is doing great things for climate change action in the UK. So this is an amazing setting to be in. So that's my kind of hopeful message at the end after telling you some not so nice things. So Lizzie, thank you for having me and having me talk about climate justice a little bit, and I hope it's helpful.
Thank you so much, Alix. Eyes on Bristol, that's very incentivizing, and it's really useful to understand how action or inaction on the part of our local businesses and organisations does contribute to that global picture, and a reminder of how critical local action is. Next, I'd like to introduce Jessica Ferrow, Bristol Green Capital Partnership elected director, One City Environment Board member, and co-founder of Sustainability Consultancy 12. And Jessica's going to talk to us about how the local context and key developments play into this context.
Cool, thanks Lizzie, thanks for having me here, and thanks Alison and Alix for your presentations that set it up nicely. So I think the thing I want to get across, I've got about 10 minutes, and the thing I wanted to talk about is basically it's easy to get really overwhelmed when you look at those graphs that Alix shared and you're like, oh, we have to get to 2 point, with all these degrees, and it's kind of, it becomes a bit overwhelming. And I think it's really important that we just need to start where we are. And we need to think global and act local and start thinking about what kind of impact we can have as a city or as an organisation within a city. And we're really lucky because we live in this amazing city, Bristol, that, as Alix said, is already showing extraordinary leadership on these issues, and it has massive ambitions. And so the first thing, I just wanted to go over a few things that are happening in Bristol, so you're aware, which you might be aware of these already, but in case not. So first of all, Bristol was the first city in the UK to declare a climate emergency in 2018, and later an ecological emergency as well, which is really important because we're not only facing a climate emergency, but also an ecological emergency. Today we're focusing on climate. They're very interrelated, but it's important to acknowledge that. And as part of that, Bristol's committed to becoming a carbon neutral and climate resilient city by 2030. And as Alix said, that is 20 years ahead of the UK target. That is extraordinary. The UK has said it's going to become net zero by 2050. A lot of people, academics, scientists would say that's too late. What we're doing in Bristol is in line with what science says we need to do to ensure a safe future for us, for our future generations, and tackle all those issues around climate justice, which Alix talked about. So what has Bristol done? It's declared a climate emergency. So what? Well, actually, then Bristol came together and created the One City Climate Strategy. And that lays out what we need to do to become a net zero city by 2030. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen, although it's not showing. That's weird. Let's just see if I can. I just wanted to show you what the climate strategy looks like in case you've not seen it. Oh, there we go. And basically, if you haven't seen this document, this is it's a very awesome document basically that we've created in Bristol, which outlines what we need to do. Check it out. I'll put the link in the chat, but basically the vision is Bristol's a carbon neutral and climate resilient city by 2030, and we've collectively achieved this transition in a just and inclusive way. And this is the 10 areas that the strategy covers. So all of those 10 areas around the outside, from transport through to buildings, through to kind of infrastructure. And the one I wanted to focus on here was number 6, business and the economy, because a lot of you here are businesses, some of you organizations and community groups as well, but I think it kind of relates to you too, that the goal here on the left is all of Bristol's businesses will be carbon neutral and climate resilient by 2030. So if you're there and you are from a business, you lead a business, you run a business, you're part of a business, you know, this strategy is saying that if we're going to be a carbon neutral city by 2030, that means your organization needs to be carbon neutral and climate resilient, or it needs to be net zero. So it's just kind of reminding you of that fact that in order to get there, we need all of the players in the city to be there too. So that's really what today is about, and what this climate action program is about, is how we can, as organizations, take responsibility. So the truth is, there isn't a plan really for how to deliver that. We don't know as a city how we're going to get to carbon neutral, but we know what we need to do, but we don't know how that's going to happen. And that's really up to you. That's up to us as people in organizations. It's up to all of us. So I encourage you to kind of dig in and see how you can play your part in delivering it. Bristol City Council on their part have put in 4 million to their programme on climate. They've building their team of climate responsibles in the council, and they've also recently funded the Citizens Assembly, which you might have heard about, which is pretty cool, which came up with a load of recommendations for the city, which is also worth checking out. There was a report from that. There's also City Leap, and then we've got the Community Climate Action Programme, which is all about creating climate action programmes at community group level in communities around Bristol, which is the programme that Bristol Green Capital Partnership are involved in as well. Lottery funding, it's an amazing programme. So I just wanted to get across, there is loads happening. There's loads happening in Bristol. But we really need more acceleration, we need more broadening, and we need more people to be involved. So everyone here, I love that there's 163 participants today. That means there's loads of organizations who are interested in this, and this is what we need. We need to kind of get away from the idea that it's just a few people who are acting on this, and that we need to move forward, and more people need to get involved. So here we are. And the thing I like to think about is, like, babies that were born in lockdown 2020, in 2030 they're going to be 10. They're going to be 10-year-olds. And will we have achieved our net zero city by then? That's up to us. That's up to us, and we need to figure that out. We are the generation that needs to sort this out. So what do we need to do? Okay, so let's move on to what we need to do. I think the most important thing is, Alix mentioned it, COP26 is happening in November. What is COP26? It is the biggest international intergovernmental conference on climate in the whole world. It's been called the world's last best chance to avoid climate catastrophe. And everyone's going to be there, even the US. Now they have a president who believes that climate change is happening. And COVID permitting, it's happening. So there has been some talk that it might not happen because of COVID. But we just have to assume it's happening, because even if it's not happening, something's going to happen in November, because there's going to be, there's going to be discussion around it not happening if it doesn't happen, or it might happen online, who knows. Anyway, let's assume it's happening. That's 7 months away. So just like, I'm just giving you a flag that that's 7 months away. 7 months is a good amount of time to plan. And it's happening in the UK. Of all the countries in the world it could happen, it's happening in the UK. So my question to you is, what can you spend the next 7 months doing to prepare for that time when climate change is going to be all that anyone's talking about? Everyone in the world is going to be in Glasgow. Everyone's going to be thinking about climate change. And what's your organisation done? How is your organisation responding? Have you got a plan to get to net zero by 2030? Have you got a plan? How can you spend the summer planning? How can you, all these young people that are affected by COVID, you know, all these young people coming out of university that don't have jobs, that really want an internship, they really, you know, UWE and the University of Bristol have these great internship programs. Can you get an intern in to help you make a net zero plan? Can you engage your team? Can you, you know, run a great event with your team and just do this? And I know it's hard, but we all have to figure out how to do that, and we all have to figure out what our plan is. Because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. You need to figure out where your emissions are coming from, and you need to, and I'll give you a hint, it's going to be buildings, vehicles, energy use, business travel, and the goods and services that you buy. So if you break it down like that, figure that out. And you're going to hear more later in this call about some tools that can help you do that. So we'll come on to that. But basically, just start thinking about it now if you haven't already. And then think, the other thing is then, how can you influence all of the people? Do you have a membership network? Do you have customer base? Do you have employees? Do you have, who are these people that you can influence? And so it's not just about cutting your own emissions, but how you can influence others to be part of this. So there's loads of tools and resources available. I'll put some links in the chat. The SME Climate Hub is really great. It's got loads. And there's some resources that this climate action program is going to produce as well. But yeah, it's about doing the work and getting started. So give you an example, Netflix, they've taken action to get to net zero by the end of 2022. They're cutting the impact of their productions, their offices, their operations, etc. But they've also committed to ramp up the number of sustainability documentaries and programs that they share. So it's not about how they're just cutting their own emissions, but how can they broadcast and kind of change other people's behavior as well. How can you change your business model, innovate? You know, I saw the team from Zero Green are here. That's great. You know, Zero Waste Shop. How can you, like, that's an extreme example of how you have a business model that's completely got sustainability built in. But there's lots of ways that as businesses we can tweak things and change things. And the pandemic's shown that we can be very resilient and change things. So anyway, I'm just going to sum up now. But basically, it's COP26 in 7 months' time. What will you be able to say at that time? What press release will you be able to put out? What will you be able to kind of have as the story that you can tell your team, your network? What will you be able to say? You know, you're getting the warning now, and like, take advantage of all these resources, take advantage of this group, and there's lots of other people who are doing it with you. So even if COP doesn't go ahead, it doesn't matter. Like, it confirms that we can't wait for countries and governments to do this. We have to act as cities, we have to act as organizations, we need to act quicker. And yeah, so think global, act local. And I'm really excited to see everyone in Bristol play their part, and everyone here being part of this network of organisations who care. So thanks so much for being here, and excited to work with you all. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jessica. The One City Environment Board has provided a mighty springboard to Bristol in publishing the One City Climate Strategy and Ecological Emergency Strategy. And especially the organisations on this call, we know that it's down to us, and we are not waiting for an invitation to act. So we're going to use the next 9 years to engage, understand and take action. And although this is clearly very ambitious, if we look back 9 years and think about how many changes we've taken, you know, new technology that we're using in our homes all the time, we know just how much we can achieve, and it is possible. So let's park that there. Thank you so much. And we're gonna go to some questions. So we've got quite a few questions coming through. I am gonna ask the first one, which is directed to Alison. So Bristol in the Southwest has a long history of trailblazing the green agenda, but as a region is still often overlooked for other areas of the UK, and particularly the North, when it comes to investment and funding. What do you think our region needs to do to have its voice heard, and particularly around the green agenda, to start attracting the same levels of funding other parts of the country are receiving?
Great question. I think the leadership you're showing on the climate agenda is really critical. There's the imperative to address this issue and the opportunity it presents in terms of job creation, innovation, development of technology. Those are all things that Bristol and the Southwest, you know, have great leadership positions in. So I think very firmly articulating that there's a real drive to make sure that the money is going to those sorts of initiatives. So I think being very clear about your leadership position on that, leading through with your innovation, your job creation. I know there's a real focus on making sure that it is a just transition. I think that's a really important one. And there's a lot of narrative about levelling up. But I think your leadership on this climate agenda really ensures that the money will focus that. And one of the things I would say is you shouldn't underestimate. You know, I spend a lot of time talking to investors who are really focused on this agenda, much more forward thinking and further on the agenda than perhaps some of governments and agencies and public policy. So they will make decisions where their money goes. They will make decisions where they will invest. And I think the more that you can demonstrate that, the more that the money will flow to that, and you will take a leading position from that perspective.
Great, thank you so much, Alison. I'm going to go to a question that we have coming in from Simon Pine. And I'll direct this to Jessica, just on the local action. What example does Bristol have of successfully affecting national or international change on environmental issues, not just showing how, but also creating action?
Good question. Well, we've done loads in Bristol. Well, we're always seen as a leader, I think, in the country. And yeah, as we said before, Bristol was the first city to declare a climate emergency in 2018. And I think it's something like 70 or 80% of local authorities now follow suit. So I feel like that's quite a good example of driving action. I think also, of course, we were the European Green Capital in 2015, and that led to a lot of activity and interest in this city around environmental issues. And I was involved in a project back then called Go Green, which was all about getting, not dissimilar to this really, and it was getting businesses together to share how to create an action plan basically to become more sustainable. And that was, and we ran lots of events, and I think over 1,000 people used that tool that we created. So I think, you know, we had created this little grassroots kind of impact there. We've also got the Climate Leaders Group, which is part of this. It's a wider, so we've got, this is the Climate Action Programme today, and there's kind of a subset of this Climate Action Programme called the Climate Leaders Group. So if any of you out there have already declared a climate emergency, you're already taking strong action towards net 30, you've got to 2030, you've got a net zero plan, you can think about joining the Climate Leaders Group, which we can put a link in the chat. But yeah, that's already, lots of organisation. We've got about 25 members at the moment, and that's really great to see. I think, we do need to move away from commitments towards action now, and I think everyone's in that boat. Everyone's kind of, right, we know what we need to do, we just need to get on and do it. So I think we can continue to show leadership in that area. So I think we can be confident that we are ahead, but there's still a long way to go.
Thanks, Jessica. Another question for Alison. I'm trying to kind of dip around so that we have a few directed to each panelist. What are the biggest barriers within your board discussions to change faster? Is it mindset, shareholder demands, legacy profit targets, alignment, or status quo bias? And that question's coming from Mark Baptist.
No, great question. Well, I mean, interestingly, the discussion around the board is very aligned for us. One of the things I did last year when I launched our purpose-led strategy was I made climate a strategic imperative of the bank. So it's not a sustainability agenda. It's very much strategically driven. And so our commitments on climate, such as, you know, I divided into 3: get our own house in order, end harmful activities, and fund and finance the transition. All of those elements are fully supported by the board. They're also in all the objectives of my executive team and linked to executive remuneration. So it's strategic. So the board are fully behind that. I think we've been on this path for a little while. So, for example, our oil and gas exposure is only 0.8% of our balance sheet, and therefore, you know, we're already making that transition. We think there is more of an opportunity, 20 billion target of financing for financing renewable energy, you know, job creation through holding 25% of spaces in our accelerators for green climate and sustainable businesses. All of those are the positive elements of what I think climate change can drive, which is transitioning and financing the transition. So, you know, as we set our objectives, it's a core part of our financing plan. So the board fully supported that when I launched the strategy, because I think if you're building a long-term sustainable value and a purpose-driven strategy, it's about making long-term commitments, not short-term commitments. Interestingly, from an investor perspective, I increasingly find, as I just mentioned, investors are very, very active on this debate. So, you know, whereas 2-3 years ago, they would be asking me at the end of a meeting, it's now a primary part of the discussion. So board fully behind this because it is part of our strategic plan.
Thanks, Alison. I've got one that I think is probably best suited to Alix. So we know that climate change is the #1 concern for our students, but they often feel powerless to affect change other than by protesting to voice their opinions. How can we encourage our young people to take creative and ambitious action and assure them this will make a difference? And that's coming from Richard Harris.
Thanks, Richard. First, I would say protesting and raising their voices is a really important way to, make changes and to respond to the climate change problem, because what we have to do is ensure that our politicians and people leading countries, at the negotiations at COP know that the citizens care about climate change. So it's a hugely important thing for students to do. But of course, it's not the only option. When I teach my courses on global justice and we talk about climate change as a justice issue, I find that really inspires students and makes them see climate change in a kind of different way. And raises their ambitions a bit, so talking about climate change as a problem for human beings is one way to inspire people. It's not about polar bears and ice caps. Of course, polar bears are important too. I shouldn't dismiss them. But yeah, I would say, students can do a lot. They can learn about climate change. They can take classes on it. They can network at the university. We've got the Cabot Institute at the University of Bristol that has lots of amazing scientists and academics from social science and arts and all sorts of places working on climate change. So networking with these kinds of people, understanding the problem is multifaceted, and maybe thinking about careers. Where could they work? What impacts could they have? And then last on my list is always personal action on climate change, because it's great to reduce your emissions as an individual and to eat less meat and all these things. But really what you need to remember is that your capability to change things exists in a much wider context of capable agents who have a lot of power. So yes, eat less meat and ride your bike and all those things, but really it's about those people in power influencing them and making sure that they do the right thing to enable you to make good decisions about climate change. It's not just on your shoulders as an individual. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks so much, Alix. And yeah, it's obviously really encouraging that these are going to be the workforce of the next decade and will be part of tackling this challenge. So we're going to have time for one more question, I think, which is again for Alison. James Berry of Bristol Credit Union has asked, what is the NatWest thinking on how to measure Scope 3 emissions for retail customers? Whilst we're confident of becoming net zero for Scope 1 and 2 within 2 years, Scope 3 is a much greater challenge with a retail customer base.
Yeah, look, I think you hit on one of the key challenges that we all face, which is the measurement and how you measure. We're working very closely, obviously, with regulators across the world and with different agencies to work out what is the right measurement and how we do it so that we get a consistency of standards to do that. In particular, we're part of a financial services task force to help develop that. I think for retail customers, we're trying to develop that sort of measure and working in collaboration to do that. But work in progress. I don't have the answer, I'm afraid, but we know it's a challenge, and I think importantly, knowing what the measurement is so you know how you can make the transition is critical, and therefore we're seeking to collaborate as much as possible on common standards of measurement so that we can then provide that also to consumers.
Thanks so much, Alison. Yeah, and Scope 3 was one of the areas that the Climate Leaders Group, and we have an early resource that that's been produced looking at that kind of as an introduction, which you'll be able to find on our website. So we've heard about the work that NatWest is doing. We've heard about the global and the local context, and now we'd like to share how Bristol Green Capital Partnership's Climate Action Programme is going to run and how you can get involved. So its purpose is to help organisations reduce carbon emissions by providing support, inspiration, whatever their starting point. We're going to help you to connect, promote best practice, identify solutions, and foster a sense of community and momentum among our organisations and businesses in Bristol. And because of the support of NatWest and Bristol City Council, this programme is free for businesses and organisations. We're really looking forward to working with those at every stage of the climate action journey to make positive changes. We're going to be running climate action breakfasts, which will focus on particular topics and offer tools and focused discussions and networking. The first breakfast has been scheduled for the 5th of May, and it's on where to start. The booking is actually now open, so I think the link's just been posted in the chat, so we'd love to see you there if that sounds of interest to you. We're going to be running intention to action clinics, so drawing on the expertise of the city to run interactive deep dive sessions and solution focused sessions that help us to tackle the more knottier barriers and kind of come to solutions together. Because as Jessica said, your businesses and organizations are the only ones that know how to solve your business and organizational challenges, even though we know what the goal is. We want to help you come together to do that as a group. We are already running a climate leaders group with 25 members, and this is open to new members. So this might be something that's relevant. It's open to any organization with an ambition to become carbon neutral by 2030 and a plan to accelerate your own and the city's progress by sharing best practice, tackling challenges together and inspiring others. And then finally, we'll be producing resources and signposting to other useful tools and guides that help to disseminate learning. And today we're proudly launching the first one of these, which is a carbon footprinting guide. It's been written with busy SMEs in mind, and it's supposed to be a user-friendly introduction to measuring your carbon emissions of your organisation. And we've published the first Spotlight series looking at green energy tariffs for businesses, which is quite a complicated area. So there's going to be links to both of those in the chat, and we'll encourage you to visit those. So Bristol declared a climate emergency in 2018, and then 20 organisations followed suit and did the same. And most of those are now working together as part of the Climate Leaders Group. But meanwhile, we often hear, but it doesn't feel like an emergency or no one is taking action. And actually, from the partnership's perspective, we know that organisations are interested in or taking action, but it doesn't always make the news, this stuff, and nor is it visible to a wider audience. So another thing we'd love to do with this programme, through the Climate Leaders Reporting Framework and other case studies, is demonstrate the efforts of local businesses and organisations that we know are being made and show that we are playing our part in the city's transformation. To make sure that this programme is impactful and useful, we need to hear from you. So we want to make sure that the programme activities and resources are shaped by your challenges. So at the end of this event, please do complete the feedback form and share your thoughts and ideas. And other ways to get involved are using the resources that are produced, joining the Climate Leaders programme, sign up to the Climate Action Breakfasts, and if your organisation offers a solution that can help other businesses on their journey, we're also offering pitches at those. So sign up to kind of pitch your solution and share those with other businesses. If you're not currently a partnership contact, then please do sign up to receive updates and use our channels to share your own. And overall, just help us shape how the programme evolves so that it's as useful as possible. So at this point, as I mentioned, Alison has an incredibly busy diary, I'm sure you can imagine. We'll be saying goodbye to Alison. I just want to say thank you again for making time for us, updating us on the work that Natwest is doing, and we're really looking forward to working with you and continuing this climate action programme together.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to join you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we're going to be hearing from George Sandilands, co-founder of a local startup called Spherics, who's offering a digital tool to SMEs to help measure, mitigate and manage carbon emissions after taking those steps within another organisation that he was working with. So I think George has just joined us. Hi, George.
Hi, everybody.
Over to you.
Great. Can you see that all right? Fantastic. So, hi, I'm George from Spherics. We are a Bristol-based social enterprise building a climate tech solution for small businesses. So firstly, a bit about me. My background's running a small creative business in Bristol in the events industry. In this past role, I worked with some very international, recognizable brands, mostly in the fast-moving consumer goods sector. Now, these brands were, on the one hand, making very public commitments to the environment, zero single-use plastics, trainers made from recycled materials, net zero.
George, I'll just really quickly interrupt. I think we can only see your desktop at the moment, so I wonder if there's a way that we could see
Hold on.
the slide.
Okay, new share, there we go. Hold on. Stop share. Right, give me a sec. Sorry about that. Excuse the technology. Doesn't look good, really, does it?
It's par for the course. It's 2021. I'm sure we've all had similar struggles. I know I have.
There we go. Share screen. Desktop 2. Share. Right. Can you see that? Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah. Apologies for interrupting.
No, thank you. It's much better than seeing my notes. So yeah, where was I? So yeah, essentially we were working with lots of large organisations, and it led us to questioning the accountability of larger organisations in sort of passing on the environmental responsibility to smaller organisations. But moreover, we wanted to build in circularity into our collaborative design process, sending sustainable ways of working across value chains and looking at project by project carbon footprint analysis, which is what I wanted to talk about today. So when I first looked at tracking the impact of my small Bristol business back in 2017, we looked at all the options available, and we found that there was sort of broadly 3 options. The first was a consultant or an expert approach. Now that is and always will be the best option, but it's very expensive and it's likely to deliver a kind of single audit or a particular snapshot of time, some suggestions of how to improve. It didn't give us the ability to report on a project by project basis without significant retainer. Now, in a wider sense, this approach doesn't also scale at the rate of change that we all need. Second option was to kind of do it yourself. So it was to bring someone on board, give them a sustainability role as part of their normal day-to-day job function, but with fake news, with greenwashing, with lots of terminology, confusion, and an ever-evolving landscape, it's very difficult to know what to do and how to align the business beyond the easy things like changing your energy provider. And now the third option was to use one of the available carbon calculators online. Now we found that these fell into 2 clear categories: tools like the Carbon Trust SME calculator, which is great for capturing direct energy spend, but in reality falls short of giving a full picture of an environmental impact, especially with the backdrop of the changes that we all need. And the other option is sort of very resource intensive calculators. They ask loads of questions, they are loads of data, needs, lots of source data, nothing was automated. And we found that it was very heavy and lacked customization. So we thought there must be a better path. We began building our own tools. This moved from kind of a basic spreadsheet into something that we really became obsessed with over many years. And after looking at then the wider opportunity and the ability that we could have to affect change, my colleague Mike and I left the company to start what has become Spherics. Now, we're very grateful since then to have had numerous colleagues join us, and we've had backing from equity partners, grant funding from Innovate UK, and amazing support from the likes of the Bristol Green Capital Partnership, Business West. There's some really exciting stuff going on in the Southwest, and we're so proud to be a part of that, the kind of infrastructure that you guys and other organisations have put together. So in terms of the wider reasons why we're building Spherics, well, as was aforementioned by Alix, to reverse the worst effects of climate change, the world needs to halve global emissions or more, 45% of emissions by 2030 and get to net zero by 2050. Now, this is the largest economic transition in history. I mean, that is mad in itself. It's greater than the Industrial Revolution and in a fraction of the time. And unfortunately, also as mentioned by multiple of the other speakers, we're not moving anywhere near fast enough, and it disproportionately affects those outside the UK and in the global south. So we need to work even harder to try and impact wider change. So why is it so important that small businesses embrace environmental accountability? Well, SMEs, according to an EU report, are responsible for around 65% of all emissions. Now, this isn't all industrial emissions. This figure includes the responsibility of the workforce, but whatever way you look at it, small businesses are some of the largest polluters on the planet, much more than any large business. And on that note, this means that in our view, large companies need to support and fund smaller businesses in their own transitions. Now, whilst legislation has not been specifically outlined for SMEs as yet, there are now numerous environmental reporting structures being brought in for larger organisations, as well as pension funds and other asset classes over the next 2 to 5 years. And due to the significant changes that are needed, it's anticipated that legislation will be rapid and severe. Now, this dramatic step change will unfairly disadvantage businesses who haven't got their affairs in order. In terms of other levers for change, cross-departmental government procurement, the largest purchaser of SME goods and services in the UK, has now committed to net zero, or by 2040, and in some cases earlier. And other leading global organisations have set ambitious goals, as Jess mentioned with Netflix. Now, all of this means that environmental procurement is coming. Companies who embrace environmental accountability will win contracts and tenders. It's simple. They'll also reduce their risk profile and can likely go on to thrive in this necessary transition to better business models. So with all that in mind, how can we help? Well, until now, we feel SMEs have lacked cost-effective and easily adopted tools to support them. We've built a platform to help businesses access the intelligence that they need to measure, mitigate and manage their environmental impact, all that of their supply chain, for a low monthly cost. We connect with day-to-day tools that a business already uses and automate the collection of information, converting the data into carbon emissions using a robust, internationally recognised methodology, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, in real time. Our view is that carbon accounting should be extremely simple and accessible. Technology is meant to do the hard work. There is much detailed calculation behind the scenes, but for you, the customer, it should be automated and easy. Now, essentially, in terms of how the tech works, we're analysing data against industry trends to deliver organisations simple choices to reduce their impact. This is combining both expert impact, expert insight and machine learning to analyse the possible courses of actions and provide the best options to minimise the impact. We've also got the functionality to automate offsets based on particular action. There's things like targeting and all kinds of other functionality that's quite useful. Now, a huge benefit of embracing environmental sustainability is that it can be used as a powerful tool in marketing and in so much encourage wider change. However, with so much greenwashing, companies need to know that they can trust their own claims. Companies promoting sustainability and creating conversation with employees, customers, stakeholders is really important, sufficient that the company doing so and promoting these practices has a grounding in science and is ultimately moving towards net zero in their operations. Now, by taking an SME first approach, we are also able to support larger organisations in tracking their value chain emissions, essentially the scope 3. So our tool is designed to accurately measure these value chain emissions, and we'd be interested to hear from any larger businesses who might want to come on board and do a pilot with us. We've currently got one going on with L'Oreal, and we're in talks with numerous other organisations. And then finally, the call to action. So we're in a beta trial stage at the minute of our product. We're not going to be bringing it to market until later this year, but we'd really like to offer the opportunity to any business that is connected through the Bristol Green Capital Partnership to come forward for a 6-month use of our platform. Just to note, we do have numerous applications, so please anticipate a small delay in our response to you, but we will get back to you as soon as possible to get going. Thank you very much. Great to be here, and thanks to all the panel for speaking.
Thanks so much, George. Radically simple way of measuring carbon emissions sounds really helpful considering the other pressures on SMEs. And I'm sure you'll receive many requests for the kind offer of a free trial. So finally, before we move to networking, I'm really excited to share a video of Bristol Green Capital Partnership member submissions illustrating that this journey is not, it's already started. There's still a lot to do, but city transformation is underway. We're not right at the beginning, and it's being driven by many actors. And in the spirit of the new normal, you'll see that some members have recorded their submissions from the comfort of their home, outside spaces, and even the comfort of their bike saddles. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you now. I think my colleague Claire's going to pop that up on screen for us.
We at ACH are most excited in the year ahead with the opportunity to train our tenants, service users and the wider community, to give them the knowledge and skills to be empowered to undertake not only their own climate journey, but to help those they know undertake their journeys too.
All of us based here at Ashton Gate Stadium, that's Bristol City Football Club, Bristol Bears and the Flyers and Bristol Sport, have come together to form a working group to reduce and assess our impact on the environment. We want to address issues around climate change, waste, water consumption, biodiversity and air quality, so that when fans do finally return here at Ashton Gate, they'll be coming to a cleaner and greener stadium.
I'm proud of Burgess Salmon and the carbon reductions we've achieved to date by switching to renewable and low carbon energy sources and by investing in energy efficient offices and solutions. We've commenced work at Burgess Salmon to determine science-based targets and to better understand where we can do more in our supply chain.
We weave sustainability and social justice into everything that we do.
These are just some of the great projects that we're working on at the moment, such as Parkos, which is all about science participatory communication, Twinergy, which is all about energy efficiency and digital twins, and KWMC The Factory are working on an amazing project called Rethink, Remake, Recycle.
And we're going to look to not only influence policy at government level by lobbying, but also ensure that we have an industrial strategy around decarbonisation and ensuring that we have Unite Green reps in place at organisations across the region.
With support from Greener Energy Futures, Bristol Credit Union now has a plan for zero carbon by 2023. Over this next year, we're really looking forward to getting stuck in and implementing that plan.
One of the many disproportionate impacts on disabled people is the lack of accessible information on climate issues. The Bristol Disability Equality Forum is therefore excited to be working with Red River Productions to create an accessible video and resource pack to introduce disabled people in Bristol to the issue as part of the Community Climate Action Project. This video will explore the impact of the climate crisis on Bristol and inspire the disabled community to understand that their voices are fundamental in shaping a just and successful transition to a climate resilient city.
We managed to reduce our energy consumption by 31% since 2011. And all of our electricity comes from a renewable energy source. This includes the solar panels on our roof. We've also created activities that help explore the different topics around climate change. This has led to thousands of our visitors pledging to make changes, big and small, to address the challenges that we face together.
We're basically not on the grid for a large majority of the year. If you go to Point Bristol, which is an old cinema which we've converted, on the roof is entirely covered in solar panels, which gives us all our electrical needs during the summer. We want to give over some of the space on the outside of our building back to nature and back to community to build out planters for wildflowers and space for solitary bees and things like that, turning what is just flat concrete into a little space for us and for nature.
We've reduced the amount of plastic we use, we're recycling more, we've generated our own solar power and we're using local suppliers in our cafe and our gift shop. The dehumidifier, which keeps this ship dry, we've recently installed some new sensors and software to help us analyse our energy data. And this year, we'll be upgrading the equipment and changing the way that we run the system, which should result in even bigger energy savings.
We're in the process of about to be building the potentially world's largest student passive house accommodation. Really proud of our catering offerings now. A third of the menu is plant-based food. Climate Action Cafe is working with our staff to really understand what actions they can take that have the biggest climate impact.
Our mission is to communicate sustainability via video, but while we're at it, we also keep our own house in order. My main passion is trees. We planted these 20 years ago. We plant many more every year, including a fruit tree for every one of our clients.
The University of Bristol has recognised the climate crisis and has pledged to become carbon neutral by 2030. Most of our waste, energy and water consumption is within our science facilities, so we are continuously working hard to reduce the carbon footprint of STEM by promoting circular economies, targeting energy consumption, water usage and waste management. Our staff and students are helping us become the first university in the world to achieve 100% institutional Green Lab certification. And as a community, we are growing more and more passionate about STEM sustainability.
We're really excited to be part of the Community Climate Action project that's taking place here in Lockleys and many other places around Bristol. We're looking at lots of issues that affect residents here in Lockleys, one of them being public transport, which is close to my heart, and also looking at greener ways to travel.
Climate crisis is real and businesses have to take the action they can to minimise their impact on our climate. And at HL, we take it really seriously, the need to act responsibly. We're thinking about our back to office plans, cycle to work, the reduced numbers of commutes, reducing the paper that we use through automating our processes. We're thinking about green energy, even through to how we recycle our waste.
We're really excited to be one of 6 community partners across Bristol to be part of the Community Climate Action, who are dedicated to bringing the climate conversation to our local areas and putting together a community climate action plan.
Big changes are coming. They can make life more difficult for disabled people, but they are also an unmissable opportunity to make Bristol better for us and for everyone.
It's all about mindset. And once colleagues, businesses and communities all act together, that's when real change starts to happen.
Keen to get our community involved.
Thank you so much to Emma Grant and all contributors for helping to make that video, which has left me feeling really inspired. And unfortunately, you might have seen that I was inspired because I left my camera on at the beginning. So apologies if that was distracting. So what's left to say is thank you so much to all attendees and panelists for joining us to celebrate the launch of the Climate Action Programme. Thank you to the programme sponsors, Natwest and Bristol City Council, for their support in making this happen. And of course, thank you to Bristol Green Capital Partnerships supporting members who are vital to all our work. And I'll just quickly take a second to name them. Avon Wildlife Trust, Bristol Water, Bristol City Council, Burgess Salmon, Business West, The Initiative, Centre for Sustainable Energy, Jacobs, Resource Futures, Triodos, Sustrans, Unite Southwest, the University of Bristol and UE Bristol. Thank you for supporting our work. What's left to say, please complete the feedback forms, share your views and ideas on today's event and the programme more generally. And we really look forward to working with many of you in the months and years ahead. There's no time like the present to initiate that connection and collaboration that we've heard this morning is going to be important to this fight and this transition. And so we hope you can join us for a networking session There's going to be a link now posted in the chat to move over to a Zoom room where we will all be able to see and hear each other. We want you to think of that like a tea and coffee that we'd usually have after an in-person event. So thanks again for joining us this morning, and have a really great day. We're going to keep this webinar open for just a couple more minutes to allow you to transition over to networking or move on with your day. Thanks again for joining.